to share, raise your hand. Who said the United States of America?
Ethan.
That's right, Ethan. This is the United States of America. Ethan, can you come on up and find Oklahoma on the map, please? That's right. That is Oklahoma. Very good, Ethan. Go have a seat. Well, today we're going to be reading a story that is set in New York State. Now, New York State is quite a ways from Oklahoma. Does anybody know where New York is on the map? Maddie, you do? Okay, does anybody know where New York is? Okay, I will show you. It's way up here. Do you see that?
Sorry.
Maddie, hang on just a second. This story is set in New York. Has anybody ever been to New York? Oh, a couple of you. Very good. Very good. Oh, Oliver?
Oh, my sister had this is what my sister had. She had surgery in New York.
Oh.
When she was 2.
Okay.
I was 3 and she banged her lip on.
And she had to go all the way to New York? Okay. Well, boys and girls, as you can see, Oklahoma is quite a ways from New York. If you drove there in your car, it would probably take you about 2 or maybe even 3 days. But if you flew there in an airplane, how long do you suppose it would take you?
2 hours. 3.
Maybe about 3 hours or so.
4.
Yeah. Maddie?
Where's Colorado?
Oh, Colorado?
Where's Boston?
Colorado is right over here.
Because that's where my grandpa lives.
Oh! Well, the story we're going to be hearing today is, like I said, set in New York. As a matter of fact, it's set in New York City. Has anybody here ever been to New York City?
Not me.
Oh, very good. Very
says
good.
The top job.
That's right. Now, New York City is quite different than Norman, Oklahoma. Norman, Oklahoma isn't exactly what I would call a city, not at least by New York City standards. Let me put it to you this way. How do most of us get around here? Oh, Ethan. Planes, okay, if we want to maybe fly someplace. But if you want to go to the grocery store, say, or if you have a doctor's appointment across town, or if you want to go to the museum or the library, then you probably drive in a
Car.
Car, that's right. Well, it might surprise you to know that not everybody has a car. Some people in New York City do have cars. Evelyn, put your hand down for just a minute. Some people in New York City do have cars, but they also use different modes of transportation to get around. Like, for instance, subways. Do you know what a subway is?
Yeah. An underground train.
Oh, very good. It is an underground train. Just raise your hand next time, please. What do you suppose are some other ways that people in New York City get around?
I'm not going to ask that.
Okay, I'm looking for an answer to my question. Is it Trenton? Go ahead, Trenton.
Sometimes people walk.
Oh, yes. A lot of people in New York get to work and other places by walking. Caroline, how else do you suppose people get around? Lots of people ride bikes. So we've got walking and riding bikes. We have subways. What are some other things that people might ride to where they need to go?
Motorcycle?
Maybe. Also, buses. And has anybody here ever been in a taxi cab?
Yeah.
You have?
I was in Las Vegas and we didn't have a car, so we had to do one wherever we went.
Oh, okay.
And in Dallas, my cousin was 14 and
And you,
had to rent a cab.
you had to take a cab then too.
Because the mom and the dad were gone.
Lots of people in New York City get around by taxi. Now, before I share this story, there's a couple more things that I want to share with you. Let me pull up an image and see if you recognize it.
Statue of Liberty.
Oh, very good. This is the Statue of Liberty. That's right, Maddie.
And that's the Empire State Building. Empire State Building.
Okay, I was going to ask, but yes, this is the Statue of Liberty, and this is the Empire State Building. And where do you suppose both of these things are? Let me hear from somebody different this time. Yes, Riley?
New York.
In New York, that's right. And what is this?
The American flag.
That is the American flag. And the American flag and the Statue of Liberty and the Empire State Building are all important symbols and landmarks, I suppose, for us here in the United States. Now, are you ready to hear this story?
No.
No, not yet? Okay.
I am.
Evelyn, what would you like to say?
When I go to Texas, I drive in a car.
Okie dokie. Yeah, like we talked about, most of us here in Norman get around by car. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on your name. Jackson, go ahead.
Can you get on the thing? Can you get on the
Jackson, take a seat, please. What's your question?
Can you get on one of those things?
Oh, yes, Jackson, thanks for bringing that up. If you've never been to the Statue of Liberty, then it's really hard to imagine how big it is. Do you see these little dots at the bottom of this picture?
People.
They're people. Now, the people look really teeny tiny next to the Statue of Liberty, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
That gives you a sense for how big the Statue of Liberty is. It is so big, in fact, that you can actually go up into it. And the two characters in the book that we're going to read about today are going to go all the way up to the very tippity top.
On the torch.
To the torch, that's right. To the torch. Okay, and the Empire State Building at one time was the largest or tallest building in the United States. It's no longer the tallest building, but you can tell by the way it looks in this picture compared to the other buildings that it really is very tall. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okie dokie. Ethan, what do you want to share before we begin?
Will you tell us what Kentucky is?
I'm sorry?
Will you tell us what Kentucky is?
I'll show you that again later after our story, and you can try and find it on your own. How's that?
Miss,
Okay.
Miss Shawley.
Yes, Natalia?
My mother's actually climbed up to the tippy, to the face of the Statue of Liberty.
Oh, okay.
Because she's been there once.
She's been there? Okay. Very good. Well, I think you're going to get a sense for what it's like to be up there, too, after you hear this book. This is The Top Job. It's by Elizabeth Cody Kimmel, and the illustrations in this book are by Robert Newbecker. Now, before I begin, who wants to remind us what an author does? Elizabeth?
What's that little thing right there?
Thank you.
This right here?
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you just yet because I want you to find out when you listen to the story. Now, I was asking if anybody can remind us what an author does. Maddie, what does an author do?
Write the story.
That's right. The author writes the story, and I told you this book is illustrated by Robert Newbecker. What did he do? Elijah?
He was the author.
Good guess. He drew the pictures or painted them. On career day, Mrs. Feedy asked her students to stand up in class and talk about their parents' jobs. Emma Sweetpaw said her dad was a UFO hunter. She said he used a 2-ton telescope to search the sky for flying saucers and a giant satellite to receive alien transmissions. Elizabeth O'Malley asked if Emma's dad had introduced her to any real live space aliens.
There's 2 of them.
She said no, but she did get to see a meteor shower. Elizabeth O'Malley said her mom was a jeweler. Elizabeth got to hold diamonds, rubies, and emeralds while her mom made a tiara for the Princess of Polonica. Aidan Draper asked if Elizabeth got to meet the princess. She said no, but she did get to see a very pretty woman trying on her engagement ring. Aiden Draper said his mom was a NASCAR driver. He went to the Speedway and got to watch the race from a special booth for very special people. I asked Aiden if his mom let him try on the flame-proof jumpsuit. He said no, but he did get to wear her helmet on the way home. When it was my turn, I stood up in front of the class and said that my dad changed light bulbs. Do you think that sounds like an exciting job?
No.
Anthony Switzer said, boring, and laughed so hard he popped the top button off his pants. I guess he didn't think that sounded very interesting either. Mrs. Feeney told Anthony to put his head down on his desk. Then she said we were out of time for career day talks and asked the class to get out our Spelling is Spectacular book. But I wasn't finished yet. I wasn't finished yet, so I didn't sit down or get out my spelling book. I stayed where I was and I kept on talking. Now remember, this is a made-up story, so you can do this in a made-up story. But what should you do in real life if Mrs. Shary or Mrs. Lowry asks you to sit down?
You do it.
Yeah. I said that my dad had changed a light bulb just last weekend. He let me go along to help. We had to get out very early because it would take most of the day. Remember how we talked about the different modes of transportation that people in New York City use?
Yes.
Or in other cities?
Yes.
Well, there they are. Then we took a bus, a train, and a subway just to get to the building where the light bulb needed changing. Trenton, you should be on the Storytime carpet, please. And getting to the building was only the beginning. I helped him put on his work stuff next, just the usual. A hard hat with a light attached, leather gloves with the cut-off fingers, a climbing harness, a coil of manila safety rope, sticky-bottom climber boots, and coveralls with his name sewed right on the front. He had a special bag clipped onto his harness to hold the new light bulb. It's about the size of our beagle's head, but 620 watts brighter. Next, we had to get the light bulb all the way to the top of the building. Everyone in my class started to look kind of interested, so I kept right on talking. I explained there was no ladder in the whole world big enough to reach the top of this building. Dad and I took the elevator up as high as it went, to the 102nd floor. Let me ask you something. How many floors are in Lincoln Elementary? One. So how many Lincoln Elementary schools would you have to stack up on top of each other to get as high as the Empire State Building?
A lot.
A lot.
133,000.
Well, about 102.
Well, it currently has 2 schools.
That's true. It does have an attic after all. But we still had a long way to go. We walked to a special hatch. We opened it up, and that's where I stayed. I had a great view of the clouds from there. But Dad went through the hatch to the outside of the building. That's where the ladder is. I explained that only extremely special and important people are allowed to climb the ladder, and I looked at Aiden when I said that. Why do you suppose she looked at Aiden when she said that? Elizabeth?
It's in the picture right there.
What?
That thing is in the picture right there.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Well, listen.
It looks like an alien ship.
Well, Elizabeth, I think it is. Listen. I told the class that my job was to stay by the hatch and be the lookout while Dad climbed. I looked for anything that might be important, like thunderstorms, or flocks of birds, or UFOs. And I looked at Emma when I said that. Now, do you remember what Emma's father does for a job?
Oh, he has a big telescope.
That's right. He has a big telescope. Yeah.
Looky, there's an alien looking in it.
Well, that's right.
And an alien touching him.
Yeah.
I'm not touching him.
I think she probably imagined that, but either way, this is a made-up story after all. Dad climbed and climbed and climbed. I said my dad had to be very strong and not afraid of heights. That's because he had to climb to the very top of the ladder, which is built onto a big antenna. The light bulb went on the tippity top of the antenna.
I don't think I would like to be up there.
I don't think I would like to be up there either. Mrs. Feeney closed spelling. Oh, Mrs. Feeney closed Spelling is Spectacular and asked, exactly how high is the tippity top your dad has to get to? I whipped out my pocket calculator. I told Mrs. Feeney that the ladder on the antenna went up for 117 feet. Now, a foot's about this long. So 117 of them is quite long, am I right?
You mean like longer than the school?
Oh, I don't know about that. We'd have to measure to be sure.
How about longer?
Listen. After that, Dad had to climb right up the antenna itself using little bolts to put his feet on. But that was only for the last 87 feet. That makes 204 feet. Plus those 102 floors we came up on the elevator. I explained that's why I had brought my catcher's mitt, just in case. Dad only had one light bulb with him, and if he dropped it, I did a quick sum on the calculator, and I didn't catch it, it would fall 1,453 feet and 8 9/16 inches to the sidewalk. So it probably would have broken. Probably, right? Mrs. Feeney said, oh my goodness, I certainly hope he climbed nice and slowly. Sarah, would you sit up, please? Girls, sit up, please. I said no, as a matter of fact, he had to go pretty fast. See, usually there's 17 million watts going through the antenna for the TV stations and radio stations that use it for their broadcasts. They have to shut them all down while the light bulb's being changed. And you know, I said, TV and radio stations don't like to be shut down for very long. Mrs. Feeney asked me to please continue. So I said that by now the sun had set and the stars were coming out. Dad and I were so high up in the sky that the stars looked like diamonds you could just reach out and grab. I looked at Elizabeth when I said that.
Elizabeth?
Not that Elizabeth. This Elizabeth.
What's Elizabeth?
Do you remember what this Elizabeth's mom did for a living?
She makes diamonds.
She's a jeweler and she handles diamonds, yeah.
I call that Elizabeth.
That's right. And I mentioned that on the observation deck below, a whole crowd of tourists started cheering. They had been watching all along. Sarah, could you sit crisscross applesauce,
I
please?
think that little thing that's flying around the statue.
Yeah.
And the empire is UFO.
Well, this is a made-up story after all. They had been watching all along. Dad and I were used to that. He held onto the antenna with one hand and waved with the other. I held onto my catcher's mitt with one hand and waved with the other. By then, there was no time to lose. Dad took out the old light bulb and pulled the new one out of a special bag. We all held our breath. He screwed in the new light bulb one turn at a time. The Empire State Building was back in business. Whoa. Everyone was still cheering when my dad climbed back down the ladder and through the hatch. He told me the bulb would stay lit for 2 years before burning out. I said this was good news for birds and UFO pilots and King Kong and anyone else who needed to see the tippity top of the building in the dark. Boys and girls, King Kong is a made-up character. He's from an old movie called King Kong that was really popular a long time ago.
I like that show.
Yeah. Mrs. Feeney said, gracious, how exciting. Is there anything else? I explained, just if anyone was interested, the antenna was originally supposed to be a mooring mast for airships called dirigibles. That's this type of
Ow.
thing right here.
Yeah,
Girls. I told Mrs. Feeney she might want to look that word up in Spelling is Spectacular and write it on the blackboard since it's hard to spell.
Look at the very back in the ocean.
Oh, this right here?
Yeah.
Good eye. Very good. I finished up by telling the class that after Dad climbed back down, we went and had a hot dog at the snack bar. Dad got me a t-shirt too. It says, I was on the top of the world at the Empire State Building. If you go to New York City and visit the Empire State Building, you can really buy a shirt like that here. Mrs. Feeney said, do you think the class could go to work with you and your dad next weekend and watch him change another light bulb? I told Mrs. Feeney that next weekend my dad wasn't going to change any light bulbs. Where do you think he's going next weekend?
The statue.
The statue. He was going to wash windows instead. Give me a thumbs up if you like that book. That's right.
That looks scary.
All right. Very good.
Waffle. Waffle.